Standby theme. Go on theme. It's Tuesday, January 7th, 2014, and you're listening to SYN Boldly, the podcast, the Sign Your Name Project. I'm your host, Trey Comstock. With me this week, for the first time on the internet, is Mr. and Mrs. Kathleen Royston!
Yay!
Better known individually as my ever-faithful co-hosts, Stephen Doss.
Morning, sunshine.
And Kathleen Royston.
It's not morning, dude.
Hey, they got married, y'all. So tonight's show is all about marriage. We're going to talk about plural marriage. We're going to talk about gay marriage. We're going to talk about modern Christian marriage. But we start tonight with plural marriage in Utah with the news.
Who would have thunk it?
So this is technically a fairly old story, but we were doing a marriage-themed episode.
It started in, 1886 when this all happened?
Okay, yes, that too. But there's recent news about it.
It started in the Bible.
Back in the biblical times.
It was in the biblical times.
It predates the biblical times, and that's one of the things we're dealing with. Anyways,
so you mean creation 6,000 years ago by God?
I read a Twitter
in 7
feed.
days.
So the other day I was reading a Twitter feed of people who were congratulating the Earth on its 2014th birthday. Yeah. Yeah, on New Year's.
I can't even make a joke about that.
And so this is way off topic for the news story, but anyways, there were all these Twitter posts I can't believe people think that the Earth is 6,000 years old. It's in the date. It's 2014 years old. I don't understand why people can't get this. And it'd be one thing if it was one or two kind of ironic hipsters, but there's 100 of them on this, and I can't believe they're all fake. So, anyways.
We live in a fallen world.
We live in a fallen world.
That's only 2014 years old.
Apparently. So it was it was also happy birthday Jesus and America. Anyways.
We digress.
We badly digress. So plural marriage in Utah. So roughly mid-December, about December 18th, a court ruling in Utah came down that couples living in a polygamous lifestyle could actually live together. Now, they could all live together as husband and wife and wife and wife, but they still can only get legally married once. But there's no longer a law against a plural marriage household living together, just as long as only one marriage is a legal, state-recognized marriage, and the rest are spiritual marriages. So, this opens up a can of worms, and it is very easy to mock. But, what are y'all's perspectives on polygamy, and specifically on this court, what I believe is a court ruling out of Utah?
I think the court ruling I think it has to be that way for legal reasons, because when the husband passes away, and let's be honest, most plural marriages are husband and wife.
Yes.
For legal reasons, the husband has to have a beneficiary, and it's the wife. And it can't be multiple wives, because then you get into a whole can of worms on the off chance that there is no will, or there is no living will that says, divide my estate up evenly between my 5 wives. And so this way it prevents a whole mess of hair pulling.
There's also tax implications.
There's also tax implications, because you're basically quintuple dipping, or however many, into the tax things. I'm going to sound weird, but I really don't have a problem with plural marriage if...
Now here's the if.
Here's the if.
There's an if.
If it's by consenting adults.
Define consenting and define adults.
Okay. Adults are people over the age of 18 who are legally recognized as being capable of making their own decisions. What in the world is going on over there?
Cables. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Who and consent is you are not pressured into it. You have the mental capacity to make said decision. You are not pressured into said decision. And there's no one who can claim you as a dependent.
So let me put it this way.
Okay.
What if you are a part of a religion? What if you are a part of a religion who tells you that it is the will of God that people participate in plural marriages? Would that qualify? Would that meet your qualification for pressure to consent?
I think it would.
Okay. Then all of these are out.
Oh.
See, there we go.
Well, I mean, you can say like, oh, my religion allows it, but I don't think you can say my religion forces me to do it. It's like,
it wouldn't say forces you to do it. It would say look at it as your duty.
Then we're getting into
does our religion force us to serve the poor?
That's true.
See, okay.
I think
so. We cannot. We don't have to serve the poor, but we feel a strong compulsion to. Would you say that? See, this is the rabbit hole.
Fine. Marriage should only be between one man and one woman.
I'm not even sure that's actually my condition, but I get a little iffy when you talk about the phrase consenting, because within a legal framework, yeah, sure, they're consenting in that no one's got a gun to their head or whatever, but they're in a society that has conditioned itself to view this as a positive and to not do it as a negative. Kathleen, you look fit to burst.
No, I'm just kind of, I'm on Wikipedia, even though I know fact-checking is the death of podcasts.
Opinions only.
Looking at the Latter-day Saints movement and polygamy, and I'm kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. I think that historically, the reason that it was disallowed had a lot to do with anti-Mormon sentiment, and not necessarily with sort of protecting women or anything like that. It was like, look at these crazy people in Utah. Oh, look, here's something else crazy they do. And I think that historically,
wild and crazy Mormons,
man. And as a disclaimer, I don't know a ton about this. But that is my understanding, that there is a historical. It was a way to legislate anti-Mormon sentiment.
Sure. And also the Mormon Church, the official LDS.
The official LDS does not condone the practice, and so those who practice this are Mormon fundamentalists and are splinter groups, essentially.
Yes.
So that's something, I think that complicates the issue a little bit. I think what also complicates the issue, at least from what I've read, which again is not a ton, but it's some, is young girls' compulsion in that kind of way. So not only in a theological, religious kind of way, but in family pressure and things like that. And so I think it's one of those things that's really complicated.
Oh, yeah.
I am not, oh gosh, I'm about to get myself in trouble. Ready? Are you ready for this, Internet?
Yep.
I am not opposed to polygamy in theory.
Yeah.
Sure.
I am not. I think that it is one of those things that, for all kinds of reasons in certain societies and perhaps even in ours, can be mutually beneficial for raising children and things like that. I do think that issues of gender come up. I don't think when we talk about polygamy, what we think about is one woman and lots of husbands.
That's called bigamy. That has its own word.
What? No, bigamy is just having two spouses.
Bigamy is two spouses.
Is it?
Yeah.
Polygamy is more than
one. Yeah.
one spouses.
So not that how do I know this off the top of my head? I just do.
Do you want more than one husband?
No,
Kathleen?
one is plenty.
Oh no. Polyandry.
Also, I am out of focus.
Polyandry.
Which is kind of the story of my life.
That happened.
When you have more than one husband, it's polyandry.
I knew there was a different word.
Oh, it's polyandry. Okay, so we never ever. I mean,
polyandromy. Yeah.
I mean, there are some societies, I believe, that practice that, but at least when we talk about it in the United States, that is never what comes up. So I think you have issues of gender and family structure and things like that. But as far as the religious aspect, forcing you to, though not really forcing you to, I think you could maybe even make that argument about Christianity too.
Sure. I'm not saying you couldn't.
that Christianity really, even in progressive circles, really privileges marriage as a state for adults. So, not that it's not complicated, because it is, but that's just something else to think about, I think.
I think I'm going to come down in a similar way, despite the challenge I issued to Stephen about this idea of consenting, because I think, like Kathleen is saying, the idea of consent in these situations is highly fraught.
Yeah.
I think, in theory, if we're going to talk about religious freedom within the context of the United States specifically, why not? This is not getting in the way of taxes. This is not getting in the way of things the federal government has their fingers in. So as long as it can be managed in such a way that everyone's rights are being upheld, and it's not just some form of, not happening too young or whatever. But the problem with this idea of spiritual marriage versus federal marriage, legal marriage, is a lot of those regulations don't matter.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that matters, is still the age of consent for sexual relationships.
Very much.
And as long as those sort of laws are being, upheld, which in some states they're very loose, but as long as those laws are being upheld and there is some semblance of consent, not apart from a religious context, my argument is somewhat of a fallacy, because there is no such thing as laws that are not conditioned by culture. And so that just because they're conditioned by their culture, why did I agree to do the draft? Is it because it's the law? Well, why is it a law? Because there's still this idea that men in America sign up to be in the military. Now, I would have had rights taken away and stuff had I not done it.
Vote.
Wouldn't have been able to. There was a while I couldn't vote anyways because my state residency was complicated. But my point is like, all of these things are culturally conditioned. So within reason, as long as they are of an age to have enough to, look beyond their own context, that they're not 14 or 16 and, this is clearly against other laws, sure, why not? But as speaking of something that is pushing legal boundaries, there was a very interesting moment on the Rose Parade this year.
It's that people actually watch the Rose Bowl parade.
I watch the Rose Bowl parade every year.
Did you watch it on HGTV?
I do, because you get it without commercials.
Oh, wow.
It's wonderful. So, yes, thank you, Stephen. I like it.
I'm not judging you. I'm judging you a little bit, mainly because you watch it on Home and Garden Television.
Exactly.
I was at home. And my mother watches a lot of Home and Garden Television.
Because it's the network of
course,
moms.
it's your mother, isn't it?
Because it is my mother.
And then afterwards, she changed the channel to the Westminster Dog Show, didn't she, or whatever?
No, the Food Network.
Then we stopped watching television and started cooking and buying things to blow up. Because why
you're
not?
From Texas.
Because you were,
question.
You were celebrating the birth of our Earth 2,014 years ago.
By blowing it up.
Because I was celebrating Hogmanay, a very important Scottish holiday.
Wait, is this
Is that the one where you drink?
The Hogmanay is...
And play bagpipes?
Hogmanay is the Scots New Year's celebration, where you go around and you toast...
Where you go around and you see how much you can get from 1 penny.
Very similar. You go around and you're theoretically supposed to go around with a bottle of scotch and toast your neighbors. We didn't do that. We blew things up in our cul-de-sac. But
because you are Texas Scots.
Because we're Scots Texans. But we did have smoked salmon as an appetizer.
Which is delicious.
Yes. It is delicious and traditional. If I can... I cannot for the life of me find the name of this thing. Okay. So... Oh, there it is. So on the float in the on the AIDS Healthcare Foundation float within the Rose Parade, a homosexual marriage took place. And HGTV, which I was watching, actually called it out and congratulated the two men who got married, and it was all very cute and very adorable. And so it has been called things such as, by the religious right, as pro-homosexual...
Which is neither religious nor right discuss.
Yeah. Which, it's been called pro-homosexual propaganda. Some folks have suggested that it is actually encouraging the spread of AIDS, which which is the rant I'm going to go off on. No, it's not. Yes, AIDS in the United States started out as what was very inappropriately referred to as gay men's disease. Because it did its initial outbreak in the United States was in the homosexual community. But part of the issue was not being gay, or even particularly that gay sex makes you more vulnerable to AIDS. Studies go back and forth. I'm not going to make a definitive statement one way or another about that. But the point is the issue was a lack of monogamy within a certain segment of that community. And so what this float was encouraging was monogamy in the gay community, which I think is a wonderful thing to advocate for, because you want to know what was really good at stopping AIDS: two monogamous individuals who don't have AIDS only having sex with each other. This is a AIDS healthcare solution that you can talk about the world over, and I think it's a place that churches can spend a lot of time talking about an issue that's real within their wheelhouse that also is really good at fighting AIDS. 54% of new infections in Kenya happen within women who are in monogamous relationships because the husband ain't being monogamous. So monogamy is a great way to fight AIDS. And so this is not promoting the spread of AIDS. That is fundamentally false. Gay marriage would cut down on HIV and AIDS transmission. Now, how much and what percentage, blah, blah, blah. Anyone who's practicing, any community that is practicing more monogamy, more lifetime monogamy, is going to cut down the spread of AIDS. That's just how it works. Also, get tested, y'all. Anyone, don't care who, get tested, y'all.
Go to Pride, get your free HIV test. I do it every year.
You usually get them free, and they're really easy to do.
No AIDS.
It's somewhat nerve-wracking, but do it.
Yeah.
That was your public health service message. So anyways, back to the religious side. So there was a gay marriage on a float in the Rose Parade. And we talked about kinky boots at the Thanksgiving.
Kinky boots!
This has been a great year for, fascinatingly controversial parades.
Parade floats.
But, so what do we think about this? Honestly, what do we think about this? Not just the reaction to it. And there was silence on the internet.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to say this, because I kind of sort of understand their reaction.
Okay, go with me.
More so than the kinky boots.
Kinky boots!
Because, first of all, I am pro anyone getting married.
Ooh, that's going to be a problem.
We're already married.
What?
Oh, no.
Okay, go on, sorry.
But I understand when you have... This can very much be seen as getting it thrown in your face.
Absolutely.
This is very much like... This is no longer a private thing between two individuals. This is now public and it's out there.
Marriage is pretty darn public.
Marriage is pretty darn public, but this
On
is
purpose.
like... it's California. They can... Now it's on my TV.
Yes.
And now it just happened in front of me, and that's not good.
Why not? Well, no, okay. Sure.
This is me acting as... That's not me saying
No, I follow you. Okay, fine. It's not good.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it is good.
Right.
Let me just say that.
So for the sake of this discussion...
discussion,
let's say it's bad. Let's say it's bad.
In certain mindsets of certain people, yes, it's bad, and yes, it's like, look at that, and now they're promoting it.
Right.
This is why I write letters to my senator complaining about PG-13 rated movies.
But I keep going back to this. Like, no one is writing about how the Stanford cheerleaders were dressed. Or...
That's American.
Do you want to know what my first thought was? Oh, good. Now gay people are big as cheesy as straight people. Equality, man.
It is true.
Yeah.
That is true. If we look
think about all those like goofy like Super Bowl, Jumbotron engagements, like all that crap.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really want to quite frankly, as a straight person, I don't want to see that. So
But there's plenty of things in the Rose. Let's look at the Rose Parade specifically. There was like a 300-foot long Honda float. Okay? So
I'm sorry, Trey, but that's capitalism. Capitalism is what determines who is smart and who is poor.
You can make a lot of money on gay marriages. Legalize them.
Gay weddings. Like, man, you just solved every economic crisis ever.
Certainly in the wedding industry. I mean, there's going to be like a huge run on the wedding planners and chiffon.
Basically what that did is it gave fodder to the impression that Christians have to be marginalized, because what's mainstream now is the things that Christians, and I'm using air quotes in case you're listening, what Christians deem as irresponsible behavior are now being promoted, and what Christians deem as positive behavior, such as
what
capitalism? I don't know.
18-year-old cheerleaders shaking it for the camera. I mean, I think that's the other thing.
Christians are
gonna get
No. Let me say this. Like, no. You know, I grew up in a very conservative household. They would have claimed that's immodesty. That doesn't need to be on there either.
Sure, I do
same
too.
Thing
I
with
say
gay.
that.
Same thing with gay marriage. Same thing with capitalism. It should be about school pride. It should be like, 1950s cheerleaders with their sweaters and their long pants. No, not even long pants. Poodle skirts.
Poodle's fine, whatever.
And that's the thing. It's like, this is just saying, it's just another way. That's another way that, this society is becoming more deviant, is now this is mainstream. It's going to be shown to my kids while they're watching the Home and Garden Network or whatever. If your
boys are watching the Home and Garden Network, they're next.
There we go. There's a nice fair and balanced view.
Now, from my personal...
in which Kathleen misbehaves.
From my personal standpoint, anything that promotes monogamy is a great thing. That's my personal opinion. But I also see their point where when you are constantly being told by the right that you're being marginalized because what we're promoting is skimpy outfits and non-American automobiles.
Let me
now they're throwing this in your face.
Let me turn this another way.
Okay.
A slightly darker way.
Oh, no.
What if I started railing because they keep showing militaristic imagery? And that half of that parade is dedicated to militaristic imagery. And what if I talk about the Christian values of peace?
It's not the military, it's our veterans.
No, but
why do you hate our veterans?
No, it's not just veterans that are shown.
Oh, yeah.
There are active duty military that march in that parade. There are then schools that dress up like the military and march, which is an inherently militaristic act. Mm-hmm. And so, what if I started... First of all, if we're going to rail about gay marriages, we need to start railing about militaristic imagery.
Definitely. And, oh wait, sorry, I'm supposed to be playing devil advocate.
And as much as I love and respect our veterans and our troops, the people themselves, for what they are doing, I think this country is overly obsessed with militarism to the point that makes Rome look like practically peace-loving. And so I'm mad about that. But no one's going to back me up on that because, this is America. So if America's about freedom, fine. They are free to marry whoever they want. In that state, it is their legal freedom. Mm-hmm. And so if that freedom goes against your Christianity, the acts of the military and their free to display goes against my Christianity. So we're all offended. Deal with it.
Outrage. I think that that's one of the great dangers of Christianity in this country, though, is it's become so closely wrapped around capitalism and
the American way.
And the American way and militarism and all of that it's hard to disengage that. So people believe, I think, sort of quote unquote, I mean, this is a huge generalization, but American Christian values maybe don't look like the Christian values that we actually believe. Mm-hmm. And so I think that
I think war is incompatible with the teachings of Christ.
As does the United Methodist Church.
Thank you.
As it turns out. So I think that's part of the issue. So people, I mean, and we saw this with the whole Duck Dynasty thing and all of this, that, and the other. But that this is when it becomes the main value of Christianity is who's marrying who. We're not paying attention to what's actually happening in Scripture.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate again.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
On you all.
Sure.
Because I love it.
Play out all over the place.
Again, Stephen as a person believes exactly what y'all are thinking. Militarism bad, love good.
Militarism bad, love good. Yes, good.
Good.
To simplify that. Now, Devil's advocate, Stephen. Well, the military needs to be supported because it's preventing a greater evil, which is the oppression of other peoples. And the only thing that's happening with gay marriage is we are saying that it's okay to sin. Whereas when we fight for our freedom and we fight to help other people gain their freedom, we're showing love.
But every time Budweiser advertises over on top of the parade, we're going to protest that.
You don't have. There is nothing in the Bible about
drunkenness. Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Well, it's everything in moderation. They're not telling you to go out and get drunk. They're telling you to, a little wine for the stomach's sake. Who said that? Paul.
No, and Jesus drinks wine. I'm not arguing against all drinking, but we're clear on drunkenness.
Yeah, and Budweiser isn't promoted drunkenness. It's promoting a beverage.
With naked ladies.
With naked ladies.
You didn't say it right. It's naked.
Naked
ladies.
Well, I might not like their advertising.
So if that's their choice to not, use their product to become inebriated and hang out with naked ladies,
I'm a natty.
It is also your choice not to marry a man.
So you're saying homosexuality is a choice?
Let me repitch this. Okay.
No. Devil's advocate 1.
No, devil's advocate not 1. Let me repitch this. There are branches of Christianity that think that all drinking is a sin. In the same way that there are branches of Christianity that think homosexuality is a sin. Mm-hmm. Now, we can argue about percentage-wise who believes what.
Right.
But let's just go with there are some that say. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, that it's still, for some, that's a sin. And yet we show it publicly on television. So for others, homosexuality is a sin. Okay, fine. But we still show it on television in ways that even might promote it. I'm not going to say, oh no, that's not promoting, it's just celebrating. Celebrating is kind of promoting. Now, I'm not saying it's trying to get people to become gay, but I'm saying it may be trying to push other gay couples to say, hey, now's the time. Which, by the way, that is exactly what that was.
Which is a good thing.
Which is, hey, now's the time. So you can say that this was promoting something that some people would view as sinful. But every drinking ad that runs, some people will view that as sinful. Every time there is a cheerleader wearing a swatch of fabric, that some people are going to find that sinful. Every time a military band marches, I think we're promoting a structural sin.
Definitely.
And so within any parade, which is relatively wholesome entertainment, it's rife with what some people will see as sin. And so we can't just purge what everyone sees as sin from public displays, because there are some people that find all public displays sinful. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's definitely a slippery slope.
Are you ready for back for Stephen Devil's advocate?
Yeah, we'll do this one more round of this, then we're going to move on.
But what they're promoting isn't just sinful. It goes against creation and the natural order.
All sins are equal in the eyes of God. Maybe not in the eyes of humans who interpret God's law.
Yep.
But as biblical as any of the rest of this is all sins are equal in the eyes of God. Merely thinking about the cheerleaders wearing the swatch of fabric is as sinful as anything else that's happening.
I will not answer questions about me thinking about other things because I just got married.
I've been married for 4.5 years, and I probably still shouldn't be talking about this on air. But the point is the mere thought of that is sinful. Whether we thought about it or not is irrelevant for this discussion.
Jesus actually says something about that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. So we should probably. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's inherently a bad thing. But all sins are equal in the eyes of God.
Yeah. And if you think this is a sin, you can't think it's bigger than another sin.
And yet it gets treated that way.
Well, but this is, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, as my disclaimer, I do not believe that homosexuality is a sin.
Nope. We've come down.
We don't believe that. But I feel like I have to say it every time because what I'm about to say makes it sound like I do.
This could be someone's first episode.
Yeah, that's why after every single time I'm going to play devil's advocate.
One of the things that we love to do is play the that's not my sin game. And so it's way easier for straight people to be like, ooh, that is happening over there, and that is the worst thing in the entire world.
Because that's not my sin.
Because that's not my sin.
I may or may not be dressing up in skimpy outfits on television, but
I am.
Yeah.
No.
But no, it is easy to play the that's not my sin game, but that doesn't make that right. In fact,
no, it doesn't make it right at all, but I think that's a lot of what's going on here is people can get their knickers in a real twist about something like gay wedding happening at the Rose Parade because that's not something they're doing. And it draws attention away from what they are doing.
So speaking of what people are doing, it's this week's discussion. Beat the tape on that one. So Kathleen and Stephen recently celebrated holy wedlock.
Our 0th anniversary.
Their 0th
Did
anniversary.
we?
Oh, goodness. She's going to do this in the rest of her life. 60 years
Forever.
down the road. Happy 60th anniversary, sweetheart.
Did we?
married?
Okay, so
It's gonna
I
make an
thought
Alzheimer's
what
joke.
what would be fun
Uh-oh.
is to play Stump the Band on scriptures about biblical obedience.
Oh, crap.
Because I've been married, Sydney, our producer, and I have been married for just over 4.5 years.
No.
And I systematically went through and got rid of all obedience language from all of the liturgy that was read. And having attended y'all's wedding, it's clear that y'all did a similar
we
thing.
did.
We didn't even have to. The Episcopalians had it down.
Yep.
Yeah, I used the Episcopal liturgy. Anyways, so we struck down a lot of that stuff. However, many people interpret the Bible to say that women are to be obedient to men. And so what I have done is I have deliberately committed an act of poor exegesis, and I have pulled biblical quotes that Google seems to think, or openbible.info seems to believe relates to women being obedient to their husbands.
Well,
and so,
.info websites are always good.
so let us start with Titus, chapter 2, verses 4 and 5 in the ESV translation.
Oh gosh, that one's
English Standard, right?
no,
It-
it's bueno.
English standard. It's not really well translated, but this is what I've got. And so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. So Kathleen and Stephen, what do you say to that?
Stephen is speaking by smacking his head against his microphone. I wasn't really listening because I was reading this.
Hey, I'll read it again.
No, you don't have to.
I'll catch up. Just
I think that, maybe at a time when the life expectancy for a child is 3 days, you want the mom to stay at home because she could probably die if she walked out, because the life expectancy for a new mother was that.
Well, I mean, that happens now
Yeah.
in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
We have a lot of children dying of random things because they're left with older children who can't handle it.
Yeah. Do I think it just should be the mother? No.
Ah,
Because I think that
very clever.
I think that shirks fatherly responsibility and husband responsibility.
But Stephen, you're very cleverly dodging the core. What I view,
Yes, I am.
I view as the core
because I don't want to
difference.
get hit tonight.
and be submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled.
So what you're saying is you don't have to be submissive to other husbands
just your
when
own.
you're playing the field.
Yeah, buddy.
So what do we say?
Do you want the responsible reading of this text?
Yes,
Or do you
Yes,
want-
please.
At least first.
Okay. Well, this particular passage and the pastorals, so 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, are the overall theme in these is order in the household of God. And so looking at these texts within context of when they were written and the kind of churches they were written to, there's a concern with maintaining order in families and in the life of the church. And this order reflects the dominant social ethics of greater Roman society. Oh, look at me not submitting because I know stuff about the Bible. And so
Kathleen, I want to need you to be
for
quiet.
churches
It's not working.
at this particular time,
We have an intervention.
I will beat you, Doss. So for churches at this time, to be orderly and reflect what's going on in the outside society would have been important, because they were already kind of religiously weird. It would have been problematic for their survival if they were socially weird as well. And I think if we look at not only these 3 letters, but also at the actual authentic Pauline texts, that there are different perspectives on this. So you have in Galatians 3:28, you have Paul saying things like, in Christ Jesus there is neither male nor female, for we are all one in Christ Jesus. So I think that looking at all of the New Testament literature in this case is really important. I think this is one of those texts that has been taken completely out of context to justify a particular kind of relationship between husbands and wives, in which submission is super obedience, unflagging loyalty, etc., etc., etc. And I also think if we look at it from where we are now, that is not the most effective way to get her done for Jesus in a relationship.
Or as my youth group had wristbands that said, "Get her done for God."
That's awesome.
Get her done for God.
I quit.
And
I
so,
quit Christianity.
so I think this is one of those things that you can't ignore them. These texts are there and they're worth wrestling with. But I also think you see sort of crazy, topsy-turvy, awesome gender role reversal in the Gospels. I think you see it in some of the other epistles. So I think it's definitely there. And I think even within the biblical text and the world of the biblical narrative, it's there. And then if you take that out and you look at modern Christian marriages in this world, I mean, Stephen and I made this, I believe we have this understanding that us as equals is really the most effective way to
if Kathleen needs something, I'll do it, and if I need something, I'll do it. And so, I'm just kidding. I was just kidding. It was a joke. Don't hate me. Oh, or we're divorced now. Aww.
Would it be an annulment? It's so soon. I think it's an annulment still.
I'm not going to answer any question like that.
But I also think there's a part that there's, even within those texts that get flagged, it's a little different. There's even still some tension. Because it's clear that, like, these are the same texts that talk about how women shouldn't be leaders in the church.
Yep.
And yet it's also very clear in these texts that
women are leaders in the church.
And that within broader Roman society, this is a point that Susan Hyland, a professor that Kathleen and I both have shared, brings up a lot, is that there is this tension between women being able to speak out in society and a value for female modesty. And that those two virtues existed at the same time within Roman society and were always kind of at tension with each other. And so the fact that these scriptures don't quite mesh well together makes sense, because Roman society didn't quite mesh on this issue. There was value for women who spoke up and did amazing things. And then it was also value that women were modest and quiet and submissive in these things. And so it's not exactly, and just like in our own society, we have this value of women as homemaker, and we also have this value of women going out and running corporations, right? You know, you have Meg Whitman at HP, or you have what's-her-face at Yahoo. I'm blanking. This is my other show. And
the one that kind of sort of ruined Yahoo.
No, the one that is kind of sort of saving Yahoo. Thank you, Marissa Myers. Like, she had a nursery put in at her work so that she could stay working even though she had a kid, like, right after she took on that job. And so we even have these same competing values like Roman society does.
I also think there's always tension when you extrapolate the world of the biblical text directly to the world in which we live, because we don't do that in other ways, and I think gender roles is one of those ways that Christianity really wants to hold on to. And I say Christianity broadly. We don't have similar expectations with other things. But when it comes to gender roles, I think particularly in conservative circles, there's this idea that hasn't changed. Well, it has.
Okay, so we'll only do 2 of these, and this will be the second one, and then it'll be time for us to close out. So I let the first one slide with some Deuteropauline material. So let's go to the heart of Paul.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go to the heart of Paul, so that we know.
I'm ready.
Okay, 1 Corinthians 11:3. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ.
Thanks,
Fine.
Skippy.
The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Go. Interpret. The head of every wife is her husband. Thus says Paul that the head of Kathleen is Stephen. Come on, you got anything? You got anything? Or have the literalists won?
The
No.
literalists have won.
No.
And as a biblical,
I think
no.
also in 1 Corinthians you see concern with this order. So you have the abuses at the Lord's Supper, and Paul getting his knickers in a twist about that not really going the way that it's supposed to. So I think this is another one that's about order.
Okay, fine. Sure, it's about order.
But
I'm not sure that
how
sure
that's
that bridges
just,
the gap you
yeah,
want to get bridged.
That is a cop-out answer by saying it's just about order.
Because that could be about order in our society,
obviously
too.
it's about order. How do we say that that's not about our society? And as the man, I will answer that for you.
Go for it, Stephen.
I think
Steven,
no.
No, you know what?
We're going to mute Kathleen's mic.
Just
No,
mute
kidding.
Kathleen's right.
Probably a good idea.
I'm very interested in what you have to say on this Stephen.
I mean,
And-
it's one of those. It's a context based thing, that, like Kathleen says, they're still writing in Roman Greek times,
Yep.
in which you have to. You're the weird new sect of Judaism that's
Yep.
eating flesh
Yep, we are.
and doing all sorts of
dunking people in water.
dunking
and
people
beating
in
tombs
water,
and-
drinking blood.
Yep, all of that.
Someone came back from the dead after 3 days. That's pretty freaky.
Yep, all that happened.
Yeah. And so you're trying to establish yourself as having some societal norms in your household.
I'm sorry, that sounds a lot like order.
Yeah, no, you have yet to bridge the order argument.
Now,
Do you have anything to bridge the order argument?
yes.
What is it?
Yes.
Bridge the order argument.
We are the societal norm now.
Yes. I
And-
agree with that.
and-
Hallelujah. Thanks be to God. Let's
Yeah.
keep it the same way.
Mm-hmm. And I think now, as the societal norm, we have the privilege
Okay.
to
Keep going.
show that our lives are not dictated by certain
Uh-huh.
roles that each of us fit. Yes, God is the head of Christ, but
And
God is also Christ.
Yeah.
We're Trinitarian. I don't know why we just don't say tritheist, but we're Trinitarian.
Because we're not.
We're not tritheist.
That we'll get in a whole argument about
Maybe
that.
next week we should talk about the Trinity.
The Trinity. Yeah.
That would be fun.
I don't understand the Trinity. Oh gosh, that feels so good to say.
I don't
I don't get
either.
it.
But I think half the point is
That you don't get it.
You don't get it.
Well, I mean, back to the
Back to the
thing.
point at hand. Keep
Yeah.
going. You're close.
So,
I have more to add to.
if we say that in a marital relationship,
Mm-hmm.
one partner is the head of the other partner.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm getting there.
You lost it.
I've
Kathleen.
lost it. Kathleen, fix me.
Jesus, seriously.
Okay, Jesus.
And I know, and I think that this is not without its complication, because as the people that we are, we believe that the Gospels were written by people and not directly by, baby Jesus, right?
But there is an element of the divine within the text.
Divinely inspired, not
and-
divinely written.
And I think, and I know that this is a little tricky, but I just keep coming back over and over and over again to how Jesus continually ignores social conventions in a lot of ways, and so that in the Gospels we have witness to Jesus acting in ways that ignore all of these very strong social conventions. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind as we read the later literature, or earlier. As we read the non-Gospels, is what does it mean when we have both of those witnesses in the New Testament?
That's fine. I'm glad
and I
you're
think
my partner.
But also,
You're so
okay,
much smarter
so
than me.
here's where I come down on this.
Trey has the answers.
I don't have the answer. This is just simply the answer I live with.
Holy
The way the text comes together is it says a lot of different things. And I think the message here is not to value one text or the other, that the Gospels are somehow more authoritative than Paul. Because, quite frankly, Corinthians is probably older than most of the Gospels. And even some of the material the Gospels are pulling from. So it's hard for me to prioritize texts. Because all of the Gospels are being written through a lens of having read Paul. Probably. At least most of them. And John quite clearly. And Luke quite clearly. Matthew and Mark less clearly, but still chronologically probably so. So I have a hard time saying anything except the text says a lot of things. And anytime anyone says clearly the Bible says, you know they are lying, or they are at least partially wrong. The Bible does not clearly say anything. The same man who is saying, submit the husbands or the head of the wife also says that in Christ there is no male and there is no female. And those two texts don't seem to hang well together. It's because Paul isn't practicing systematic theology. He's writing letters into specific situations. And so it's hard to even say, what does Paul think about this? And we have two letters that we're pretty sure that Paul wrote, and they don't exactly hang together. And so what we have to do is we have to decide within ourselves. And this is why Scripture, for us as Methodists, I think the idea that Scripture is not the sole authority here is part of what matters. That part of what matters is our experience. And that what our experience says matters in how we read and interpret and decide what is important within the texts.
I also think, at least within Paul, that those two things we all say different things at different points in our lives. And I think that if you look at the Gospels as being later and perhaps interpretive of
certainly Luke and John
of that material. And like Luke is the womaniest heavy. That's not a word. I don't even know what I'm saying.
We can make it a word. Feminism is making words for a century.
Most lady-ish.
The most ladies in Luke. I think that says something. You read something and you interpret it and you're like, well, I'm not really sure that's what's going on, and you work with it so it's living and dynamic even within the text. And I think that's something to hold on to. That if there's this much movement within a canon that is fixed, how much more so in the rest of our lives as well. And I think that that's been really helpful. And I think there is definitely value in not just being like, well, that's stupid, and throwing the text out. Because it's there, it's part of our canon, and I think that wrestling with it is a faithful activity, and it requires that we do some thought and some
mental gymnastics
and maybe learn more and look things up and be intellectually curious. But I also completely agree with what you were saying, Trey, about experience. And I know I had someone tell me that Stephen and I were the exemplification. Is that a word? Did I
exemplary?
Dang it!
Exemplar.
There we go. I'm so tired of what it means to be equally yoked. And I think that that's something that in our relationship we've been very intentional about.
Very much so. We want to be two equals that just happen to want to show everyone that we love each other for the rest of our lives.
And also to, love God and serve other people.
And love God. The first act we did as a married couple was serve communion.
Sure.
And that's what I think a marriage should be. It should be service to each other and service
to the world.
Doesn't matter, gay, straight, polyamorous, or monoamorous.
Hey,
serve each other, serve the world the way Christ loved and the Christ served.
And on that note, it is time to end. Thank you so much for joining us on this special wedding-themed episode of SYN Boldly. If you have any feedback to tell us how dead or wrong we are, tell us how dead crazy we are.
Or wrong we are.
How dead wrong we are. What is it? Podcast at synboldly@endfear.org. Facebook.com/the Sign Your Name Project, or at SYN Boldly on Twitter. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord and end fear by signing your name. Good night.
I hate to poo-poo your police work there.
Don't you know?
We watched Fargo recently.
And take us off live record.